What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. I am here to examine another issue of the X-Men. Today, I will be examining X-Men issue 8, written by Stan Lee, with pencils by Jack Kirby, inks by Chick Stone, and lettering by Sam Rosen. Sam Rosen is back on lettering. It was for a couple of issues, Art Simek, and then Sam Rosen did a few issues, then Art Simek did last issue. Now we're back to Sam Rosen again on lettering. And this issue introduces a new mutant for the X-Men to fight. This is Eunice the Untouchable. We start off with the X-Men in a training exercise, and Beast, he accuses Cyclops of getting a little power hungry, and Cyclops says, you know, I'm just trying to make the professor proud. I don't want him to regret choosing me as the temporary leader of the X-Men. So he gives them all a break, and then Iceman and Beast, they go out on the town, and then they see a little kid who is trapped on this water tower, and then Beast goes and rescues the kid, and then the crowd, they turn into an angry mob, and they try and attack Beast and Iceman. And so they return back to the mansion, and Beast says that he has had enough, and he is not going to be an X-Man anymore. He doesn't care about humanity. He says that Magneto was right, and that humanity does not deserve to be saved, but he doesn't say that he's actually going to join Magneto, which, if he wanted to, I don't know how he would find Magneto. But anyway, he leaves, and then he becomes a professional wrestler, and he basically just wants to make a little bit of money. I can't imagine that Beast would want to just stay as a professional wrestler as a career path. I imagine that he's only wanting to use this to get himself started, because he seems like he would be much more interested in becoming a professor of some kind. It doesn't seem like this is something he would want to do for the rest of his life. But while he is professional wrestling, he meets Eunice the Untouchable, and he suspects that Eunice is a mutant, and then he sees Mastermind in the audience, and he sees that Eunice and Mastermind, they know each other, and then we find out, we the audience find out, that Eunice wants to join Magneto's Brotherhood, but Magneto doesn't want to just let anyone in, even though he's already let Namor and the Blob in, and that was his undoing, and this actually references that. Mastermind tells Eunice, Magneto has some trust issues, he's been disappointed before, so you're going to have to prove yourself. You're going to have to defeat one or more X-Men before Magneto will let you join the team. Which seems a little unfair, since Magneto and the entire Brotherhood have not been able to defeat any of the X-Men at this point, so it seems a little unfair that one of the criteria for joining the Brotherhood is defeating one of the X-Men. And here's a weird thing. Eunice says that he's never even met any of the X-Men, but Hank, he was wrestling under the name Beast, and the X-Men are celebrities at this point. We saw in issue 2 that everyone knew their names. People knew who the Angel was and who Cyclops was, and so Beast is wrestling under the name Beast, and Eunice just finished beating that guy. You would think that he could tell Mastermind, yeah, I just fought the Beast, and Mastermind was there. Mastermind saw that everyone was saying, boo, Beast, we don't like you. So you would think these two, between the two of them, they would be able to figure this out, but they don't. And then Eunice goes out there and he sees a bank robbery in progress, and he decides to rob the money from the bank robbers, and then the X-Men, they come in, he pretty much mops the floor with them, and then they go back to the mansion, and they see that Beast is now back at the mansion building a machine, and he says he's there to help them, and they say, okay, cool, what are you building? He says, oh, this is going to increase Eunice's mutant powers, and they're like, no, don't do it, and he runs away without explaining what he means by that, and then he increases Eunice's abilities, and everyone is just throwing him all kinds of shade, saying, how dare you, Beast, you betrayed us, wasn't it enough that you just left the team? And then we find out why Beast was doing this, because with Eunice's abilities increased, he is not able to touch anything. He cannot even grab a piece of food to eat, and so very quickly Eunice becomes desperate, and then Beast goes to him and says, okay, I can decrease your powers now, but you cannot be a supervillain, you cannot join Magneto. And then the issue ends with Eunice basically saying, I wasn't cut out to be a supervillain, and then Beast says, alright, I want to join the X-Men again, and everyone is like, yay, and that's how the issue ends. And this is a pretty good issue. There are some silly bits here and there, but overall, I really like a lot of what this issue does. One thing I forgot to mention, this actually shows us where Professor X is right now. I wasn't entirely sure if it was going to do that, or if we were just going to see him in the issue where we actually see what he's doing. But he is communicating with Cyclops, and Cyclops tells him that Beast has left the team, and Professor X says, don't worry, he's not going to join Magneto. So I wonder if Professor X knew what Beast was doing at this point, because whenever Beast Beast first leaves the team, nobody knows who Eunice is. So Professor X doesn't know what Beast has in plan later. So I wonder if he's just really confident that Beast is not going to join Magneto. But Professor X even tells Cyclops that he is in the Balkans in Europe and that he is searching for Lucifer. He does not explain what Lucifer is. So as far as Cyclops knows, Professor X is looking for the fallen angel from the Bible, but we will find out more about Lucifer in next issue. But that is all that we get to see of Professor X right now. This issue also brings in more anti-mutant bigotry from humans. We haven't gotten to see a whole lot of that in this series so far. If I'm not mistaken, we've only seen it in one issue before. And in this case, it really only happens to kind of kickstart the plot so that Beast will leave the team, and then we can kind of have a little bit of suspense. Is Beast betraying the team whenever he increases Eunice's abilities? And it doesn't come completely out of nowhere. It would have been a little weird if it was Angel, Iceman, or Jean Grey who left the team, but we have seen that Beast, in one of the issues, it was issue 4 or 5, I believe, he was thinking to himself about how he doesn't really want to be a superhero, and he would rather just pursue a life of a scholar. And so it makes sense that he is the one who wants to leave the team out of everyone here. Or Cyclops. It could have just as easily been him, because he was telling the team last issue that he was thinking about leaving. But it makes sense that it's Beast, although I do have a little bit of an issue whenever Beast comes back and he says, I know how to defeat Eunice, let's increase his powers, and then everyone says, stop, are you crazy? We don't want to increase his powers. And then he doesn't explain what he means by that. All he had to say was, if I increase his powers, he won't be able to eat, he won't be able to drink, and eventually he will fall right into our hands, and then we can force him to stop committing crimes. That's all Beast had to say, but instead, Beast just kind of gives him the silent treatment. He increases Eunice's powers, and then he says, don't worry guys, it was for your own good. And I feel like the entire half of this issue could have been much faster. We could have had a lot of the conflict resolved much sooner if Beast had just explained himself to his teammates. And since he's already left the team and he's already told Cyclops that Magneto was right, I feel like he's already kind of treading on thin ice a little bit. So he didn't really have to kind of make them worry like that. Maybe he was just messing around with him, but I feel like he could have explained himself a little bit more. It kind of reminds me of those sitcoms like Three's Company, where there's some miscommunication and then some big, huge thing happens that takes up the entire episode, all because nobody would communicate with each other. And that's kind of like what's going on here. But I do like that Eunice is using his abilities to make a living for himself. That's something that we haven't really gotten to see yet. We sort of saw that with the Vanisher, where he was using his teleportation powers to grab money or defense plans and then try and sell them and make a profit off of that. But here we have Eunice more or less making an honest living out of his powers. Of course, nobody knows that he's a mutant except for Magneto and the X-Men, but I kind of like that we get to see that. We don't really get to see that a whole lot, even in the later years. Most of the time, people are just using their mutant abilities in combat situations. We don't really get to see them use them in their everyday lives, so I thought that was kind of a neat touch here. Also, this is the issue where Iceman fully goes from being the snowman Iceman to being covered in ice, and Cyclops even mentions that he almost looks transparent, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because I know in the early 90s when Emma Frost was messing around with Iceman's mutant powers, and she possessed him and kind of was really using his powers in different ways, we find out that Iceman traditionally would cover himself in ice like he does in this issue, and then we found out in the early 90s that he could actually become ice, and that was something that he was still experimenting with whenever we got into the mid-2000s in Mike Carey's run on X-Men Legacy, or X-Men before it became X-Men Legacy. But that is something that we see that Iceman is very powerful in later issues, much more powerful than he suspects, but here we see that he is apparently somewhat transparent. That's what Cyclops says, but that is kind of contradicted in later decades later on as we get to see his powers explored a little bit more. But overall, I don't think there's a whole lot more to talk about here. We do see Cyclops kind of pontificate on his romance for Jean Grey. He wishes that he could tell her how he feels, but since he is the leader of the X-Men, it would be inappropriate. Very similar to how Professor Xavier was thinking about how he loves Jean Grey back in issue 2, and as far as I know, that won't be brought up again until the mid-90s during the Onslaught saga. But that's something that Cyclops is using as a crutch for why he won't tell Jean why he feels. I don't know why he wouldn't tell her why he felt before Professor X made him leader of the X-Men, but hey, that's none of my business. And Jean also feels the same way about Scott. We haven't had that confirmed yet. There was one issue where where Jean was wanting to go with Scott to look for the Blob when Professor X was sending them all out to look for Blob, but she ended up going with Angel instead, and that was the closest that we knew to Jean having any feelings for Scott. But here we see she does feel the same way for Scott, and for whatever reason, she's not telling him how she feels. I don't know. But we have seen, I can't remember if it's in this issue or if it was in the previous issue, but Angel does feel for Jean. He is kind of thinking to himself, like, man, Jean clearly feels for Scott. Why won't he see that? He's kind of thinking that to himself, like, Scott must be blind. Why isn't he noticing that Jean likes him? So it's interesting that at first Angel was kind of just the rich, preppy jerk who didn't really have a whole lot of human emotions. In this issue, Iceman even says something when Scott knocks him down. He says, hey, that'll knock the conceit out of him, or something like that. I think he says, that'll knock the conceit out of that human parakeet. So yeah, he was kind of just the conceited Draco Malfoy of the team. But here we do see that he has feelings for Jean also, and those are not reciprocated, or at least it doesn't seem like they are. So we kind of got a little bit of a love triangle thing going on here. We'll just ignore the Professor X aspect of this romance since that won't be brought up again for 30 years. So we've kind of got a little bit of a love triangle here that is going to kind of be in the background, or in some cases in the foreground, for at least the next 60 or so issues. So that's going to be something that's only just now getting developed, where we get to see that Jean likes Scott, Scott likes Jean, Angel likes Jean, Jean does not really like Angel in that way. So that's going to be kind of something that will be ruminating in the background for a while now. Other than that, I don't think that there's anything else to talk about here. We do see that Jean Grey's mask is changed once again. She's kind of been her hood slash helmet mask thing. It's been changing over the last few issues. It was like a full head mask thing, and then it was like points, and then the points went away, so it was just like face, and now it's back to being full head. So anyway, I'm not sure if they're going to keep it on full head or if they're going to show her hair like they have been doing for a few issues. Maybe she just has multiple mask things and she just changes them out whenever she goes, depending on how she feels. I don't know. But anyway, that's about all that I have to say about this issue. It was an alright issue. It was nice getting a break from the Brotherhood. I mentioned in yesterday's issue that it's nice getting to take a little bit of a break from them. I like the Brotherhood, but when we had 4 issues in a row of the Brotherhood fighting the X-Men, we kind of want to see something new, and we get to see that here. We will get to see something new next issue as well. Anyway, I hope you guys liked this video, and in the meantime, consider this issue examined.